بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Alhamdulillah. Just before I go into the text, I wanted to cover a few things about the methodology of Imam Malik's school. All of the schools, the four schools, and there were many schools when these four were formulated. There was Imam Tabari had a school, Layth had a school, Abu Thawr had a school. There were many different schools, but for whatever reasons, the agreed upon schools became these four schools of Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik's school, Imam Shafi'i, and then Ahmad ibn Hanbal's school, radiyallahu anhum jami'an. So the Imam, Imam Shafi'i wrote a very important book called the Risala, and in it he set down a methodology for interacting with the Quran and with the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And that methodology, even though he is considered the founder of Usul al-Fiqh, the other ulama were using the methodology. It just hadn't been identified. It's like people speak language and then grammar follows. So Imam Shafi'i, what he did really was, in the same way that Aristotle codified the rules of logic, it wasn't that people, you'll find logic all through Plato's dialogues with Socrates. He's using syllogisms in his reasoning, but Aristotle was the one that identified and gave it names: minor premise, major premise, conclusion. So you'll see that. So Usul al-Fiqh follows the methodologies that were being used, and they had different methodologies. But the first and foremost was the Quran was the primary source for Islamic legislation, and the second was that the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was the second source, and then the Ijma'. You have the Qiyas and the Ijma'. So Qiyas is using the Quran and the Sunnah and making analogical reasoning. So the ulama divide, for instance, they divide intoxicants and narcotics. You have what are called muskirat, and then you have murqidat, soporifics, and then mukhaddirat or mufsidat, which are narcotics. And they classified each one of these. So, for instance, hashish is not as severe. It's not as severe as alcohol in the Islamic continuum, but it's still considered prohibited because yughayyib al-aql biduni nashwatin wa tarab, the way the fuqaha say it. It causes a clouding of the intellect, but without the same elation and intoxication that you get from alcohol, for instance. So, by analogy then, even though khamr is what's mentioned, and khamr is a muskir, kullu muskirin khamrun wa kullu khamrin haram. You know, every muskir, every intoxicant is a type of khamr. So it doesn't matter if it's from grapes or dates or barley, it doesn't matter what it's from, it goes under that category. But by analogy, the reason is because of the effect that it has on the intellect, on the aql. So by analogy then, drugs become prohibited. And that's how they work with the qiyas. And then the ijma' is what is agreed upon. There's a lot of debate about ijma'. And whether or not there really is an ijma'. But there's definitely an ijma' of the Sahaba about certain things. For instance, when Umar ibn al-Khattab mentioned the Tahiyya, Ibrahimiyya, nobody objected. So, and other examples like that. But within the madhabs, there's definitely an agreed upon opinion about things. And then there's also things that all of the ulama are in agreement upon. For instance, the prohibition of homosexuality. That's mujma' alayh. There's no khilaf about it. So nobody can come, like there's certain modern people that have written articles that in fact, I saw in a book on Islam that was published in England by somebody saying there's nothing in Islam that condemns homosexuality. I mean, anybody can write whatever they want, but that's mujma' alayh. So to deny that then is considered that you're actually outside of Islam. If you deny something that's agreed upon and known out of necessity, like every Muslim knows that. Every Muslim knows alcohol is haram. It's ma'loom min ad-din daruratan. It's just necessarily known. Then if you deny those things, however, if you deny, for instance, that 1/40 of your wealth is an obligation to give, that's not known by necessity. That you have to study fiqh to know that. If you deny zakat, that's one of the 5 pillars, but the actual amount of the zakat is not known by necessity. So that's just ignorance, and somebody's excused for that type of ignorance in terms of takfir. So, but once you get past those 4, you move into the areas that are there's disagreement about them. And Imam Malik uses certain things that the other Imams don't use. And one of them, and this is the most important for you to understand the methodology of the Maliki madhab, one of them is called the Amal of Ahl al-Madinah. And Imam Malik considered Medina to have a unique status, that Medina was not like other places. There were 10,000 Sahaba that are buried in Baqi'. It was the place where Abu Bakr and Umar ruled as caliphs. And Uthman radiallahu anhu. So, and part of Imam Ali's khilafah was there until he moved it to Iraq. So Imam Malik considered the ulama, the scholars of Medina, to have a unique perspective on things because they did not simply read hadith or study hadith, they actually experienced the practice of Islam as an amal, that they were living Islam. Islam was not something like in books that you studied. It was actually things that people experienced. And there's a famous debate with Imam Malik and one of the Iraqi scholars about the actual amount of the sa'a. And Imam Malik just told somebody that was in the gathering to go get his sa'a, the actual physical cup that he used to measure the grain for zakat. And he brought it, and then he said, "Where did you get that?" And he said, "I got it from my father." And he said, "Where did he get it from?" And he got it from one of the Sahaba. So he said, you can debate all you want. We have the measuring tools of the Sahaba, And the same with the adhan. He mentioned that he wasn't interested about what they said about these things. So that aspect of his madhab causes confusion for people. That when you have a sound hadith and the Malikis say, well, we know that hadith, but we don't follow that hadith. Well, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. If the hadith is sound, then it's my madhab. That's what Imam Shafi'i said. Well, that's true, but Imam Shafi'i left certain hadiths that were sahih because they contradicted other hadiths that were sahih. So it's not absolutely true. What Imam Shafi'i was saying is, I'm going to follow the Prophet ﷺ before I follow the opinions of others. Ahmad ibn Hanbal says the same thing. Ahmad ibn Hanbal prefers a weak hadith, which more falls into the category of Hasan in his methodology, but he prefers a weak hadith over the opinions of people. Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu rejects many ahad hadith because they don't follow qawa'id that he firmly believes are established in the Quran. So this idea that you just simply follow the hadith without being able to do tamhis or some kind of gharbala of the hadith, where you put it in a sieve and sort it out. And there's a famous story of Ibn Wahb, who was one of the great scholars of the Maliki madhab, and he's also one of the rijal of Imam al-Bukhari. Ibn Wahb knew just untold numbers of hadith, and he became confused, and he actually said that he memorized so many contrary hadiths that he tahayyart. He said, I became confused. And he said, but thank God for Malik, because he went to Malik and he would say these hadiths and he'd say, leave that hadith, leave that. And he helped him sort out these hadiths. Imam Malik had, Ibn al-Qasim said when after Malik died, he went into his house and found stacks of hadith that he never related. And people used to say to Malik, so-and-so relates that hadith, why don't you relate it? And he said, anybody that relates everything he knows is a fool. In other words, some things Imam Malik did not consider weighty enough for him to teach. If you look at the Muwatta, he spent 40 years honing the Muwatta down, over 40 years. And there's about 1,700 hadith in there, 700 of which are actually not even hadith, but rather sayings of the people of Medina. So Imam Malik was very influenced by the scholars of Medina who believed that the religion was about action, it wasn't about information. And that's why for him, far more important than amassing lots of hadith and knowing all these different opinions was the actual what do we practice, because he really saw the deen as a practical matter. And he was not interested in those type of hair-splitting debates. He disdained asking about things that hadn't occurred. And when people would ask him about things that hadn't occurred, he would ask them, has this occurred? And they would say no. And he said, well, then come back when it's happened and we'll talk about it. Or when people would want to debate with him, he would say, go to Iraq. Just go because they like debate. But in Medina, they don't like debate. He also said that that argumentation is not from our religion. Argumentation is not from our religion. He would leave if people started debating something. He would literally get up and leave. A man came to him once and said, I want to debate you. And he was from the Murji'ah. He was from a sect of Muslims. And Imam Malik knew that he was from that sect. And he said, what do you want to get out of the debate? He said, well, if I win the debate, you follow me. And Malik said, and if I win the debate, he said, I'll follow you. And he said, what if a third person comes and debates us and he beats us? He said, then we follow him. He said, you're going to be on a new religion every day of your life. He said, what I know is what I know, and I'm not interested in debate. So Malik he wasn't looking for something new. He had inherited a school from the Tabi'een who took it from the Sahaba, and he really felt that the corpus was there. It was just a matter of learning it and teaching it and transmitting it. That's how he understood his school. And so one of the reasons why it spread so far and wide was because he was in Medina, and he was known as Al-Alim al-Medina, which is the scholar of Medina. And there's a hadith in Tirmidhi, it's a sound hadith, and the Prophet ﷺ said that there's coming a time soon when people would strike the sides of camels, يَضْرِبُونَ أَكْبَادَ الْإِبْرِ يَطْلُبُونَ الْعِلْمِ, and they'll seek knowledge. And he said, فَلَنْ يَجِدُوا أَعْلَمَ مِنْ عَالِمِ الْمَدِينَةِ. They won't find anybody more knowledgeable than the scholar of Medina. And the ulama of the time said, we understood it to be Malik, because there was nobody that got that laqab, that nickname, other than Malik. And another thing that's very interesting about Malik, and it's one of my favorite stories about him, that he had a rival who was another muhaddith, who Malik didn't really like very much, and the other man didn't like Malik. It was kind of a mutual thing. But he said about when Imam Malik wrote the Muwatta, and he called it the Muwatta, which means the well-trodden path. This is the way that many people have gone before. When he wrote the Muwatta, he put it out, and it had an amazing acceptance. Well, people started writing Muwattas, and somebody came to him and he said, "Katharat al-Muwatta'at." There's a lot of Muwattas now. Like, you started this thing, and now there's a whole bunch of Muwattas. And Imam Malik said, he didn't say anything other than, he said, مَا كَانَ لِلَّهِ دَامَ وَاتَّصَلْ وَمَا كَانَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ انْقَطَعَ وَانْفَصَلْ. What's for Allah will continue on and remain, and what is for other than Allah is severed and cut off. So, I mean, he was pretty much just leaving it to, if I was sincere in this, Allah will give it tawfiq, and if I wasn't, then it won't get that tawfiq. So it doesn't matter what people do. In the end, it's whether Allah accepts it or not. And that was his view about it. So the Muwatta is not the basis of the madhab. It definitely has a lot of the opinions. It has some opinions that are actually not Malik's opinions. Sometimes he points them out, other times he doesn't. For instance, people that argue for qabd argue that the qabd is in the Muwatta, but in the Mudawwana, which is the authoritative book of Malik's fiqh, they don't have qabd, it has sadal. So that's an example. But Imam Malik would use, he put in the Muwatta several hadiths to show people that he knew the hadith, and that he despite that, he wasn't using the hadith. So another example is the masalih, which Imam Malik focuses on maslaha more than the other imams. So he believes that the sharia is essentially there to serve human beings, and things that are beneficial to human beings that can rationally be discerned should be incorporated into the law. And that's why public welfare is so important in his madhab. What's called maslaha. He also because he has an immense amount of wara', and Sha'rani says his imam is Umari. It's really following the madhab of Sayyidina Umar. He also has what's called sadda dharaya, which is to cut off pretexts. When he worries something will lead to something else, he might have a legal ruling that in normal circumstances wouldn't contain that ruling. So an example of that is Imam Malik considered it makruh to fast the 6 days immediately after Ramadan, after the Eid. And the reason that he did is he said that he was afraid that people would actually consider that part of Ramadan. So that's cutting off that pretext, sadda dharaya, that he does. Istihsan, which is equity, is another aspect of his madhab, where sometimes he will prefer a position that follows the spirit of the law more than a position that follows the letter of the law, because sometimes following the letter of the law can actually lead to an unjust ruling. And so when he sees that, he'll actually move towards a ruling that is closer to the maqasid, or the spirit of the law. So Ibn Ashir basically gives us there was one story I wanted to. Another aspect of the sadda dharaya is that he prohibits the selling of weapons when there's civil strife. So it's actually haram to sell. Normally it's permissible to sell weapons, but when there's civil strife, when people are actually killing each other, he says it's haram, because he's cutting off the pretext of that. He also prohibits giving gifts to public officials. So you can't give a gift to somebody who's in a government position just as Merry Christmas or something, because of the possibility for corruption, and then that person feeling like they owe you a favor, because that's the nature of gift giving, is that people feel indebted to you. And he has several other examples of that. But Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, of all the imams, I think probably the distinguishing factor in Malik is that he is uniquely, from the imams that have become canonical, he is uniquely the only one that is considered a master muhaddith and a master faqih. None of them have that status. Abu Hanifa was a muhaddith, but he was not at the level of Imam Malik. He's not, even Ahmed ibn Hanbal, who was a muhaddith, his musnad contains many weak hadiths, and he did not have the critical. Why isn't there a Hanbali class where? In the camp? Is there any Hanbalis? You're Hanbali? Well, you're definitely a minority. I mean, I know, we can't, it's hard to serve. We don't have, there's very few Hanbalis. I mean, in the Muslim world, there's a handful of Hanbalis in Syria and in Palestine. And then there's Hanbalis in Saudi Arabia and in Kuwait and a few in Qatar. And that's pretty much it. So the majority of Muslims that we serve are Hanafi, Shafi'i, and Maliki. We don't, Ahmed ibn Hanbal is an imam, but it's just there's not a lot of Hanbalis. So, I mean, I think you'd have to go maybe to Saudi Arabia or something and find a teacher. Because I don't know any Hanbali teachers in the US. And I know one student of the Hanbali madhab from the Americans. He lives in the Emirates. Other than that, we don't have trained teachers that could even teach the Hanbali madhab. Yeah. So, yeah, Imam Ahmad was a master of hadith, but his fiqh is not at the level of Imam Malik. And the same is true for Imam Shafi'i, who was a faqih and a master of fiqh, but his hadith is not. And this is what Qadi Iyad points out in Tartib al-Madarik, that Imam Malik uniquely had that mastery of these two fundamental sciences. Exactly, that's the way they look at it. They, like Imam Ahmad was muhaddith faqih, Imam Shafi is faqih muhaddith, Abu Hanif is faqih muhaddith, but Imam Malik goes both ways. Yeah, he goes both ways with equal dexterity. He's the only one that has that maqam. And that's agreed upon. Nobody debates that. Now, the other thing about Imam Malik radiallahu anhu is that he did not teach hadith in his fiqh class. So he actually didn't mention hadith in his fiqh class. If you go through the Muwatta, he doesn't mention hadith. And that's very important because one of the things that people say about fiqh is like, where's your dalil? This is a very modern kind of thing. What's your dalil? Fiqh was not taught with dalil. The dalil was the faqih that was teaching the fiqh. Like Imam Malik is the dalil. You don't know hadith without Imam Malik. And to learn hadith and fiqh, you have to study usul. You can't, because it's not simply here's your dalil. Sometimes the dalil is very subtle. It's not, sometimes the dalil relates to the fact, like for instance, Abu Huraira is a muhaddith, but he's not a faqih. Abu Huraira rarely gave fatwa. He did give fatwa, but rarely. So when Abu Huraira has a hadith that has fiqh in it, the imams will not necessarily take that hadith. For instance, Abu Huraira used to do his wudu up into his arm, because the Prophet ﷺ said to Yazidu fi ghurratihi, like if that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the people of wudu are known, they're ghur muhajjalun. They come with white arms and white faces and white feet. So the Prophet knows them through that. So the Prophet ﷺ said about doing the hadith that to increase in your ghurra. So Abu Huraira understood that to mean to go beyond the elbow. None of the other Sahaba understood that. So the Imam Malik said that's not what it means. It means to do wudu on top of wudu. It doesn't mean to go, because the sunnah is to go up to the elbow. There's no hadith that indicate the Prophet. So there's an example of a Sahabi who understood something, but his fiqh of that hadith, and Aisha corrected Abu Hurairah in several instances in fiqh. Like she said, he misunderstood the hadith. So Abu Hurairah was a transmitter of hadith and not necessarily a faqih. The way that the ulama understand this is that they say the muhaddith is like the pharmacist, and the faqih is the doctor. The pharmacist gives the medicine, but it's the faqih that prescribes it. And so the muhaddith is not really somebody who's necessarily understands the fiqh of what he's teaching. So now we're going to go to that chapter on, it's called مقدمة من الأصول معينة في فروعها على الوصول. This is an introduction to the usul of, which is very basic, but it's important for fiqh. And the first thing that he says is that the khitab, al-hukmu fi al-shar'i khitabu rabbina. Al-hukmu, the hukm is a legal ruling in Sharia. And the legal ruling is khitabu rabbina. It's a statement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and muqtadi fi'l al-mukallif iftuna, that has to be acted upon by anyone legally responsible. So if you are legally responsible, the mukallaf is somebody who reaches puberty. Puberty is known by the signs of puberty. The underarm hair, the body odor changing, breast development, the hayd for menstruation for the girls, and then the mani, which is seminal fluid, and then a change also in the throat, you know, where they get the Adam's apple. So these are the signs. But in the Maliki Fiqh, there's a khilaf, is it 15 or 18 if you don't get any of those signs? Ibn Ashur says that it's 18. So a person, if they don't have any signs of puberty, at the age of 18, whether they have them or not, they begin a mukallaf. So they have a taklif statement. So the taklif is your legal responsibility to fulfill whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has joined in you. بِطَرْبٍ أو إذن أو بوضع لسبب أو شرط أو ذي منع. So it has forms that are 5: a command, an authorization, a stipulation. So the talab is where you're commanded to do something. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you have to, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامِ, fasting is prescribed upon you. So that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a talab. And then an authorization, the idhn, comes with the permissibility to do something, because sometimes things are not permissible and other times they are. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's many things are mubah. Allah says, kulu washrabu, eat and drink, but not to excess. Or bi wada'i. So a stipulation has either sabab, shart, or a prohibition. So for instance, the sabab would be when the sun reaches the zenith, right? At the zenith, 90 degrees. At the point it reaches 1 degree away from that 90 degrees, so at the 91st degree in the heaven, which is 4 minutes technically after zawal, at that point, that is a sabab for the obligation of dhuhr. That's called a sabab. Is a sabab for the obligation of dhuhr. Before that, there's a mani'. So there's a mani'. So sabab and mani' are related. So before that, you cannot pray dhuhr. There's a mani'. And so Allah put that as a sign. And also a condition of dhuhr is that it enters in the time. That's a condition. Or that you're in wudu. That's a condition. It's a shart. Shartu sihhati salatikum. So it's a condition of the validity of your prayer is that you're in wudu. Or if you had janaba, that you removed the janaba through ghusl. If there's no water, you did it temporarily through tayammum. So these are the ways in which the hukm of Allah becomes applicable through talab, idhan, and then the wada' of sabab, shart, or mani', a preventative. Does everybody understand that? Any question about that? Okay. No, that's when it becomes obligatory. That's a sabab. But it goes all the way to, in the Maliki madhab, to right before the asr. All right? You can pray any time during that period. No. That's just the beginning. Yeah, that's the beginning. The sabab for the obligation of dhuhr is a 1 degree movement away from the kabad as-sama. Then it's a mani'. Then you cannot pray. It's haram to pray it. Yeah. I'm going to do that when we get to the prayer times, because Malik's prayer times are the most lenient of all the madhabs, and it's one of the areas where he's very, very generous. So, and then he says, أقسام حكم الشرعي خمسة ترام فرض وندب وكراهة حرام. So the categories of legal rulings in the Sharia are 5. There are 5 categories. Fard, which is also called wajib. In the Hanafi madhab, Abu Hanifa distinguishes between fard and wajib. Wajib is more like sunnah mu'akkada in the Hanafi madhab. So for instance, Abu Hanifa says it's wajib for a man to wear the hat in the prayer, which is why you always see Hanafis, even they'll put a handkerchief on their head. But he doesn't mean fard. These are technical terms. But in the Maliki madhab, fard and wajib are synonymous. So the nadbun is mandub, all right, which is also called sunnah by, most Muslims call, like the prayers that you pray before dhuhr and after dhuhr, most Muslims call those sunnah, but they're actually called nafila, right? Because the Malikis distinguish between a sunnah and a nafila. And then they have sunnah mu'akkada and nafila mu'akkada. So those are called nafila mu'akkada. But in the language of common people, they're just called sunnah. The rawatib, yeah. So, and then you have karaha, which is discouraged, makruh. Something is makruh. I'll explain all 5 in a second, how they relate. And then finally haram, which is a prohibition. Now the way to understand these the best is this. Fard is that if you do it, you're rewarded. If you leave it, you're punished. I mean, maybe or maybe not, but there's a punishment that entails leaving it. Mandub, you're rewarded if you do it, you're not punished if you leave it. Mubah, neither nor. Right? The mubah is neither nor. Because he says thumma ibaha is the next one. Neither nor. And then the karaha, you're rewarded if you leave it, but you're not punished if you do it. And then the haram, you're punished if you do it, and you're also rewarded if you leave it with niyyah, if it's something. No mandub is associated with a punishment. It's extra. I mean, the reason mandub is important and nafila and sunan is because they act as a they redress the shortcomings of your fard. So the first thing you say after you finish your fard prayer, what's the first thing that you say in the sunnah? Astaghfirullah. And the reason you say astaghfirullah is because your prayer is never what it should be. So the shortcoming of the prayer is something that is redressed by the extra acts that you do. Imam al-Nawawi radiyallahu anhu likens it to the prayer is a gift, but the sunnah is the wrapping that you wrap it in to bring it to the king. And even though the wrapping is extraneous, people always like gifts wrapped. You know, it shows that there was more love in the gift than just giving the gift. So he likens it to that the extra acts are ways of embellishing what you have to do. And then he says, فَمَأْمُورٌ جُزِمٌ, a command given resolutely is fard. So in the Quran, when Allah uses a command, for instance, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, that if there's what's called fi'l amr in the Quran, it almost always means because of an obligation. You know, qatilu fi sabilillahi, you know, struggle in the way of Allah. Qatilu. It doesn't say min at-tayyib law tuqatiluna or in tuqatiluna. You know, it would be good if you struggled. It doesn't say that. It says qatilu fi sabilillah alladhina yalunukum min al-kuffar, for instance. Or it says aqimu salat. You know, establish the prayer. It doesn't say you know, it would be good if you established the prayer. No, aqimu salat. So when that's resoluteness, that's called jazm. So when the hukm is jazm, it's considered fard. Now there are times when for instance, the Prophet said, "Kuntu anhaakum an ziyarat al-qubur fazuruha." I used to tell you don't visit graves because he was worried about the jahili practices. Once the deen was strong and he wasn't worried about the shirk that was involved in things like that, he told people visit the graves, and he used an imperative mode, command, tarab. But that's not an obligation. Do you see? It's not an obligation. The Quran says, "Kulu washrabu," eat and drink, but not to excess. That, I mean, obviously you have to eat and drink to stay alive. But eating and drink, the command to eat and drink doesn't mean, you know, that it's imperative at all times to eat and drink or whatever. So it has to be understood within the context. But when it is resolute like that, then it's considered fard. And then dun al-jazmi mandub. When it's other than jazm, it's mandub. So it's either sunnah or nafila, depending on that. And dun nahi makruhun wa ma hatman haram. If there's a prescription, if you're told not to do it, it's for karahiyah, unless there's a proof that it's for tahrim. Because tahrim is the hardest thing to establish in usul. That something is haram is the most difficult thing to establish. To say something is haram, you have to have a strong proof. Because the dominant opinion is things are halal unless there's a proof that they're haram. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything in the heavens and the earth for humans. So, and then he says, مَأْذُونُ وَجْهَيْهِ مُبَاحٌ ذَا تَمَامٍ. An authorization of either or is merely permitted. So when it's you know, Allah says, "Kulu washrabu," eat and drink. That means everything is halal to eat and drink unless there's a qaid. So in usul you have generalizations, umum and khusus. You have itlaq and taqyid. So you have something that is absolute, and then you have something that's restricted. So when Allah says eat and drink, that's atlaqu. He atlaqu al-hukm. He made it absolute. It's unrestrained. But then there's things in the Quran that tell you what not to eat, and there's things in the Sunnah that tell you what not to eat. And because of that, those become exceptions from the general rule that everything is halal to eat or drink except for wine, right? Because al-khamr rijsun min amal shaytan. It's an evil. فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. You know, are you going to leave it like I've told you to leave it? So that's an example of and then he says, وَالْفَرْضُ قِسْمَانِ كِفَايَةٌ وَعَيْنٌ وَيَشْمَلَ الْمَنْدُوبُ سُنَّةً بِدَيْنٍ. The obligations are of two types, collective and individual. A fard ayn is يَتَعَيَّنُ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ مُكَلَّفٍ. It is an obligation upon every adult Muslim, male or female, unless there's a proof otherwise. Like jihad is not an obligation on the women unless a city is attacked directly. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah didn't, so he said the jihad of women was hajj. The fard is kifaya, and the fard kifaya goes under the bab of jihad in books of fiqh. That's when they talk about fard kifaya, because jihad itself is a fard kifaya, which is to defend the lands of the Muslims. Unless obviously they're incomplete, if they're being attacked, then and it's not enough for a group of people to do it. It becomes incumbent on even the women at a certain point. So the kifaya are things like engineering is a fard kifaya, medicine is a fard kifaya. All the things that help a society flourish and human culture to flourish are actually fall under that category. And the fard ayn are those things that Allah has made incumbent on everybody. The fard ayn are 6 basic categories, but the most important thing is learning what you have to do to fulfill your religion. And that's why prayer and fasting is fard ayn on everybody who's an adult who prays and fasts. You have to know the basic rules of praying and fasting. A lot of Muslims don't know these rules, so they're considered athim. They're in a state of sinfulness until they learn the rules of praying. And then also the same is true for fasting, because there are rules that go with fasting that if you don't learn them, your fasting is incomplete. And the same is true for zakat and for hajj. And then it's also a fard ayn to learn anything that you go into. Like if you're going to get married, you're supposed to learn the rules of hayd. For instance, a man, hayd is not just for women. A man is supposed to learn the rules of hayd too, because they apply to him in marriage. Otherwise, they don't apply to him. If you are going to enter into commerce, then you have to learn the rules of buying and selling, because there are rules that are related to that. I mean, he says earlier, he says in the bab of tasawwuf, he said, يُوقِفُ الْأُمُورَ حَتَّى يَعْلَمَ مَا اللَّهُ فِيهِنَّ بِهِ قَدْ حَكَمَ. He does not do anything until he knows the legal ruling in that thing. So it's actually incumbent upon Muslims to know what the legal ruling of something is, to know what the legal ruling of, I mean, a lot of people, ahkam al-lisan are amazing, the rules of the tongue. The Tuhfat al-Burur, which you're studying, the book on the rules of parents, is very important to know, like what you owe to your parents, because your parents have immense rights over you, and those rights have been codified in the Sharia. So the kifaya and the ayn are very important. The basic rule is the ayn needs a proof that it's a fard ayn. The Prophet ﷺ said in Ibn Majah, a famous hadith, طَرَبُوا عِلْمًا فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ, and then the idraj of the hadith, which is something was added by the ruwat, وَمُسْلِمًا, just to emphasize, even though it was understood man and woman, but that was added to emphasize that. And that's why the hadith is related with men and women. The learning is an obligation on every male and female. You have to learn. And so seeking knowledge is incumbent. It's a fard ayn to seek knowledge. Even the ulama say it's permissible to disobey your parents in seeking fard ayn knowledge. If they say, no, you can't go study, and you don't have that knowledge, it's permissible to disobey them in that. That's how important it is. So that is a basic, he's giving you a really basic primer on understanding usul. But the beauty of this is every single thing in the world goes under one of those 5 categories. And you can add to that, salihun wa batinun, or fasid and salih, which is like certain marriage contracts are invalid. Right? And so those are the 2 that are added on to those 5 things. So anything that you can think of, what's the legal ruling of, using paper cups? It's definitely makruh, I would say. Because, it leads to israf. It's a type of extravagance. And anything that's extravagant is... So everything has a legal ruling. What's the legal ruling of using a microphone in a masjid? The ulama permit it because you can raise your voice in a masjid, even though it's makruh to raise your voice in a masjid. And if it does tashwish, it can reach the level of prohibition. But to teach using a microphone is permissible in the masjid if it's not during times when the prayer is going. So those are examples. Everything has legal rulings.
What about in terms of the khutbah, like some masajid, the khutbah is very loud constantly.
I mean, if it's you can ask doctors what levels of decibels are, and if it's going to hurt the ears, then it enters into the haram. So, and unfortunately, there are places where the decibels are too high. That's true. But I mean, you can, if it's harmful, generally it's either makruh or haram, depending on the degree of harmfulness. But any la darara wa la dirar. There is no harm and there's no reciprocating harm. That's a qaida in qawaid al-fiqhiyya. That's a strong qaida. There is no harming and there's no reciprocating harm. So anything that yudurruna is something the Sharia does not encourage. Unless it's in the very thing itself, like sometimes there are things that you have to do that the harm, the benefit that's derived from the thing is greater than the harm incurred. And these are, a lot of it's common sense. I mean, a great deal of usul is really common sense, which is why it's a great gift to have common sense. It's very uncommon. Yeah. I mean, common sense is the idea of your five senses working together, so that you're kind of in a harmony. That was the common sense. Was like it was everything working together, because these are all inroads for knowledge. Your eyes, you see, you hear, touch, taste. Like you smell something and it doesn't smell good. Common sense says don't eat it, which is why the mustaqdarat, like in the Shafi'i madhab, things that the self naturally is repulsed by, he considers prohibited, because it's common sense. If something smells bad, now obviously there's taste involved. I mean, a lot of French cheeses smell horrible, but people eat them anyway, right? So there's urf that goes under those categories, and that's why Imam Malik says these things are urf issues, because some people consider certain things disgusting and other people like them. So, but there is definitely a common sense element here. The next section, is there any questions on that section? When I talked about what? Well, there's things that the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that are makruh to do, but he did them to show that they weren't haram. No, not in a sighat al-amr. Yeah. Unless it's in a negation. La taf'alu. Normally, la taf'alu, if it's an amr, it's for the tahrim, but not always. Do you see what I mean? So the amr can be for makruh, but it's with the negation. Yeah. Oh, that's a good. Yeah, no, that's an interesting example. That Ata radiyallahu anhu considered it makruh, but he derived it not from the amr. Yeah, that's a good example. Ata radiyallahu anhu, Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi in Ahkam al-Quran says about that Ata, from min diqqati fiqhihi, astakhraja karahiyat al-darb. But he took it from a hadith, which is La tadribu ima Allah. Don't strike the maidservants of Allah. And in another one he said, Akrahu an yadriba ahadukum ahluhu thumma yudaji'uha fi akhir an-nahar. It's distasteful to me that one of you should strike a maidservant and then sleep with her at the end of the day. In other words, there's an incompatibility with intimacy, love and intimacy, and with violence. I mean, that's pretty much what the Prophet ﷺ was saying. So Ata understood that even though it says وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, to strike them. It's really tap them, because darb can be a tap. Like in tayammum, they call it darbat al-ula wa thaniya, and it's a tap. So darb doesn't just mean hit; it can mean tap in Arabic, and it's closer to, you know, it's like a slap on the, you know. I mean, you see it in films and things, yeah. You know, you see those films where the woman's hysterical and the man like slaps her and suddenly she's like normal. It's that is basically, that's the extent of what was possible. But the idea of violence being associated with that is totally haram. Nobody's ever in the history of Islam said that domestic violence was unacceptable. Nobody in the history of Islam. I don't know any alim who's ever said that you can beat a woman, beat her. Nobody. All of them, even Ibn Abbas, I mean, if you look, you know, his thing about the miswak is a clear indication that they all had problems with the verse. You know, it's like, this can't mean, because the purpose of a home is sakina, litaskunu ilayha. The purpose of marriage is that you protect a woman. So if you become the source of her fear, something's gone deeply wrong. Yeah. Yeah, if لا يسأل رجل عن ضرب امرأتي, that's true. But if you look, that hadith, which is in Aridat al-Ahwadi, Qadi Abu Bakr's commentary of Tirmidhi, if you look at his commentary on that, no, sorry, if you look at the Al-Aun al-Ma'bud, which is Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he says the meaning of that is لا يسأل عن ضرب امرأته, a man's not asked about hitting his wife after it's happened, if people hear about it, because it would lead to backbiting against her. So it's to protect the woman. So, because if you ask, why'd you hit her? And you say, oh, because she did this, that, or the other, he's exposing her faults. That's what it meant. You know, people misunderstand this religion. I mean, that's why you need ulama. I mean, if you don't have ulama. A story of what? The hijab? Oh, Ayub, Job, yeah, Job. So he hits her with the twig, yeah. Yeah, he took 100 and bound them together, and they were grass. It was grass, just to get out of the nadar. Yeah, it was grass, which is very soft. Yeah. No, it's very clear. I mean, it's just outrageous that any Muslims could argue domestic violence. It's outrageous. Yeah. Exactly. No, it's really, it's very troubling. The Prophet never hit a woman or a child or a servant, ever. لم يضرب رسول الله امرأة ولا ولدا ولا غلاما قط. I mean, it's emphasized. Ever. He never hit. And وَلَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ إِسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You know, you have in him the best example. I mean, he's the best example. And he said, لَنْ يَضْرِبَ خِيَارُكُمْ. The best amongst you would never strike a woman. I mean, he said that it's something low. He said, مَا رَأَيْتُ أَمْلَكَ لِذِي لُبٍّ مِّن كُنَّ. I haven't seen any creatures more possessive of a man of intellect than you women. أَمْلَكَ مِن كُنَّ لِذِي لُبٍّ. Somebody who has intellect. If you and so somebody that doesn't have intellect is like a beast. They control women. But people that are sensitive, people that have intellect, tend to be controlled by women. You know, that's more their nature, is to submit to the and that's the way the Prophet ﷺ was. That he irda'u nisa'ihi was very important to him, to make sure that they were happy. So anyway, we come to the book of purity now, Kitab al-Tahara. Tahara in the Arabic language, it relates to nalafa, cleanliness. And but the tahara is a what they call sifa hukmiya, yustabahu biha ma yumna'u min al-hadathi wal-khabath. It's a quality, a legal state that you're in that permits you to do what would normally be prohibited because of hadath or khabath. Hadath are those ahdath, are the occurrences that happen biologically from, like urine, feces, wind, those things that put you in a state in which you lose your wudu or ghusl. And then the khabath are impurities. So you have some feces on your robe or something. Tahara removes that. So now water. So that this is basically the reason the books of fiqh begin before wudu about tahara is because you need to know what water is what's called tahirun wa tahur. There's two types of water in terms of purity. Tahir is water that is tahirun, it's pure, and you can use it for adat. Tahurun is water that's pure that you can use for adat and ibadat. Adat are like everyday things. So if you put rose water into water, it's tahirun, but it's not tahur. It doesn't purify other things. So you can't use it to remove najasa, and you can't use it to do wudu or something like that, because it doesn't have that purifying element that the water does normally. So if you so he says here فصل وتحصر الطهارة بما من التغير بشيء سلم إذا تغير بنجس طرح أو طاهر لعادة قد صلح إلا إذا لازمه في الغالب كمغرة فمنطق كذائب. So he says that ritual purification is obtained through the use of pure water that is free of any alteration by something that changes its taste, smell, or color. So water should not smell if it's pure water. It shouldn't have a taste. It doesn't have a taste like other things have a taste. Obviously, the water, you can taste water, but it doesn't have, it's just water. It doesn't have that taste that other things have. And then that it doesn't have a smell. So if it has any of those three, one or more of those three things, it loses its tahuriya. If it's impure because of an impurity, then it loses its tahiriya. It's not tahir. So the tahuriya is the ability for it to remove impurities of hadath or khabath. And then the tahiriya is that you don't use it for even adat. You don't drink it or put it in food or cook with it or something like that. Unless, he says, if it's safe from impurity, najis, and we're going to do najis in a second. If it's safe from impurity, if it changes because of impurity, then it's discarded. But if it's changed by a pure substance, then you can use it for conventional daily, non-devotional uses. إِلَّا إِذَا لَازَمُهُ فِي الْغَالِبِ. Unless it's something that becomes an intrinsic property, like rust. Like if it has rust color, then it's still tahur. Or, for instance, if it has a smell like arsenic or sulfur, like certain, if you're in a place where the water is sulfuric, then that's something yulazimuhu fil ghalib. It's always with it. So that's considered. And now, chlorine is part of, it's just part, it's yulazimuhu fil ghalib, and it's done for maslaha, to protect people. So if it has a chlorinated smell, I would not use like pool water to do wudu if it's got chlorine in it, because there's no necessity to do that if you have other water to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, what I would do is I would wash with it, and I wouldn't use it in your mouth, because the mouth is only a sunnah. Yeah, I would do that before I would use iodine in the water. Hmm. Well, for instance, no, you find places where water has rust in it because of where it's flowing from. You see what I mean? So for instance, because of pipes, you get that redness. That's still pure water. This is about water. Yeah. I mean, water, water is the foundation of our religion. Without water, I mean, everything's based on water. Our life is based on water. Our prayer is based on water. So water is very important. Water's going to become increasingly important too, because the water tables are all dropping, and the wars of the 21st century are probably going to be water wars. Water conservation is part of our religion also. The Prophet ﷺ said that it was, he said it was fiqh to waste water even in a river. Like, because people could say, if he said that, they say, oh, well, he was living in the desert, and, but he said, وَلَوْ عَلَى نَهْرٍ جَارٍ. Even if you were on a flowing river, to waste water is israf, it's fisq. وَلَوْ عَلَى نَهْرٍ جَارٍ. That's what he said. I mean, that's so clear that it's about conservation. It's not about, desert. And we waste a lot of water. I mean, the average person uses 6 liters to do wudu. And you can easily do wudu with half a liter, easily. Mm-hmm. It's probably, maybe a little less. Yeah, it was half a liter, around there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, water is pure. It's pure and purifying by its essential nature. It's only things that come into it that change its state. But the basis of water is pure. Just like kullu nashifin tahir, that's a qaida. Any dry thing is assumed to be pure before you consider it to have impurities. So if you're in a house and there's babies that are urinating and defecating, then you have cause to believe that the carpet, even though it's dry, might have impurities on it. But if you go into a house, there's no children, there's no dogs or anything, then the assumption is that it's pure. So you assume purity before you assume impurity. You assume permissibility before you assume impermissibility. That's an assumption in fiqh. Things are pure before they're impure. Things are halal before they're haram. Mm-hmm. What's that? Yeah, ocean water is tahir. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, a man came to him ﷺ and said, أركب البحر ولي قليل من الماء فأعطش. I get thirsty. If I did wudu, then the water would go. And he said, ماء البحر طهور ماؤه البحر طهور ماؤه وحل ميتته. The water of the ocean is pure and purifying, and the dead of the ocean is halal to eat. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's one of the 3. That's why he, obviously, the salt taste. And as far as we know, the Prophet ﷺ did not go to the ocean. He saw the ocean because Allah showed him the ocean in the cave at Ghar Thawr. Allah opened it up and showed him the ocean. There was a boat to take him if they needed it. But he never visited the ocean. He learned to swim, though, in a birka in Medina when he was a little boy. He was visiting his akhwal, his maternal side of the family. And he learned to swim in a little... It used to be there. Unfortunately, they recently destroyed it. Mm-hmm. What's that? When he was in the cave with Abu Bakr, he looked to the other end of the cave, and there was an opening, and the ocean was there, and there was a boat. When they were afraid that, the Prophet wasn't afraid, but Abu Bakr was terrified. Yeah, on the Hijrah at Ghar Thawr. So he looked, and Allah showed him the ocean. And in other words, he had an escape if he needed it. Just gave him tranquility. He took the coastal route, but if you look at Sheikh Abdullah al-Qadi's, he didn't go to the coast. It's a coastal route, but he did not go anywhere near, the ocean. I mean, he might have seen it, I don't know, but as far as we know, he definitely didn't travel on it. And the Sahaba discouraged ocean travel until Muawiyah. Muawiyah convinced Omar ibn al-Khattab to start a navy. But before that, Omar didn't want to do it. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said the biggest proof that Allah is Latif bi'ibadihi, is sailors. Because he said they're the worst people. He said, afsaqu khalqillah. They're like the most corrupt type of people, sailors. And he said, and yet they travel on little sticks across vast oceans, and Allah causes them to arrive safely. When Sayyidina Umar asked Amr ibn al-As what boats were like, he said they're like little sticks and the people are like little ants on them. He said, I wouldn't want to force any Muslims to do that. So, just to go on what is tahir, because this is important in relation to what makes things impurity. Tahir is every living thing is considered tahir according to Imam Malik. Araqahu wa damuhu wa mukhatuhu wa lu'abuhu. It's sweat, it's blood, unless it comes out. The masfuh, once it leaves the... and then it's mucus, like the phlegm, and it's saliva. That's all pure, including dogs and pigs, according to Imam Malik. And Imam Malik said there's no proof to say that pigs or dogs are impure. Their meat, the meat of the pig is najis, to eat it. But the pig itself is pure, it doesn't la yunajjis. And he said about the dog, Imam Malik knew the hadith, إِذَا وَلَغَ كَلْبٌ فِي إِنَاءٍ فَاغْسِلُهُ سَبْعًا. If a dog licks in a bowl, that's what it says, a bowl. It doesn't say if it licks you. It says if it licks in a bowl, wash it 7 times. Now Imam Malik said, if it was for najasa, there's no need to say 7 times. Because najasa, you just remove it, however much it takes you. It might take more than 7 times if it's something that's hard to get off. So he said the fact that he said 7 times means there's some other meaning to it. It's ta'abbudi. He called that ta'abbudi. There's ma'qul al-nas, and then there's the nas that is ta'abbudi. Ma'qul al-nas means it's rational. Ta'abbudi means it's rational, but we don't know the reason. أخفى الله سبحانه وتعالى علته عنا, like he hid its legal rationale from us. So we don't know why there's 3 rakats at Maghrib or 2 at Fajr. It's ta'abbudi. There's a reason, but we don't know why. Well, that's different. See, if they roll around in their feces, it's the feces that's najis. It's not the pig. Do you see? So if a cat comes up to you with feces on it, the feces is najis. You have to avoid the feces, but the cat itself is not najis. Yeah. The hunting, yeah, exactly. The other proof that the Malikis use is that the Quran states that you can eat what your dogs hunt. And and if something that is najis bites into meat or something, the meat becomes impure. So Imam Malik said it can't be najis because the meat's not impure. There's nothing, even in the Hanafi madhab, they don't break your wudu. Yeah. I mean, dogs are unjustly treated, to me, by the Muslims. I'm serious. I really believe that. Dogs have been really given a bad rap by the Muslims. Dogs are nice animals. There's a book by a Yemeni scholar, فضل الكلاب على كثير ممن لبس الثياب. The superiority of dogs over most who wear clothes. Yeah. That it has no, I don't think it's him, but you know, he just and Hassan al-Basri has 10 qualities that are in dogs that should be in every seeker of God. Hassan al-Basri, like he said, they get up at night and like they howl at the moon. He said seekers should get up at night and call on God. He said that they won't eat without looking around. Dogs, they always look around before they eat. He said they're always grateful. If you do something for a dog, it's always grateful. Like if you feed it, it's like gets really happy. He said that they're always loyal. They never turn on their masters. They protect the weak, like dogs. And there are many stories in this culture of dogs that save children, and you know, they have ghayra dogs. I mean, there's a dog. There's an amazing, I read this story about a lady who was attacked by a bear, and her dog ran like 10 miles or something to this place and just was barking so intensely to the people that they knew something was wrong, and he was like trying to get them to come, and they followed him and found this lady and saved her life because of that. Many stories like that. Of dogs that, I mean, I read that in the newspaper, you know, which doesn't mean it's true, but there are many, many examples. So dogs are given a bad rap, I think, by Muslims. In my own teacher, Marabat al-Hajj, wallahi, I used to eat dinner with him at night, and he would take the couscous, put it in his left hand, and he fed the dog while we were eating dinner. Wallahi, saw it with my own eyes. Because Bedouin have dogs. You know, Bedouin actually like dogs. And Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, the great Maliki scholar, had a dog for hirasa, because it's permissible to take dogs for hirasa. He had a dog for hirasa, and somebody asked him about it. He said, wallahi, if Malik was alive today, he would take a lion, you know, because there was so much crime or something. Anyway, a dog, you shouldn't have a dog in the house. But we know that the Prophet, there was a puppy dog in the house. Aisha had a puppy dog. And that's why when Jibreel didn't come for 3 days, it was because the puppy was in the house. So there were dogs. This idea that the Prophet hated dogs or something. And there's a hadith about the black dog, the aqur. But that has to do with wild dogs. They were feral dogs that were in Mecca that used to come down from the hills. And they had rabies. So the Prophet told them to kill them if they come down. But Muslims think it's like every dog. No, they were wild dogs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you shouldn't, in the backyard, in the yard. Yeah, dogs are good animals. And I think Muslims should have pets anyway. I'm not encouraging you to get a dog because other Muslims, I mean, I would actually, you know, like to have a dog for my kids because dogs are very protective of little children in particular. I mean, they will attack anybody that tries to mess with, you know, a child. But, you know, Muslims, I mean, it's like poor Khalid Abu Fadl had a dog and, you know, people made a big deal about it. No, I mean, you have certain dogs are vicious. I mean, there are certain dogs that are very violent. Most dogs would never do that. They're like cats. I mean, cats know intuitively not to scratch babies. You know, they do. That's why they're alif. They're domesticated. Domesticated animals, that's their secret, is they don't attack us. That's why they're domesticated. But there are certain dogs that are verging on wild dogs, like pit bulls. Pit bulls will eat babies. You know, they'll attack people and kill people. Yeah, they are pit bull. No, but I mean, pit bull that's absolutely haram to have a pit bull. Because it's worse than a gun. They have a potential to really cause harm on others as well. They're more wild than they are domesticated, pit bulls. And the people that have them are usually kind of criminal mentality. Do you know? They are. It's a low-life type of mentality that wants a pit bull. You know, most people like dogs because they're companions. They're happy. They're nice. Pit bulls are like, I mean, you know, it says something about the owner more than the dog.
Is the meat of any other animal without the oven big?
Well, if it's dead, yeah, if it's dead. And then there's a khilaf about certain animals. Well, Malik Malik limits the prohibition of, I mean, Malik permits eating dogs. There's karahiyah. You know. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, Koreans, you know, they need a madhab. Because that's like a delicacy in Korea. You know, when the Koreans came to Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, all the dogs disappeared. And there was a Korean in LA who ate their next door neighbor's dog. It was a big case in LA. They tried to sue him and everything. And he was like, you know, it was a nice looking dog. He got hungry. I once, you know, I had one of my teachers, he was Mauritanian, Sheikh Muhammad Shaybani, and there was another one, Sheikh Sidia. And Shaybani he kind of inclined towards the prohibition of dog. Because there's an opinion in the Maliki madhab that it's prohibited to eat muharram. But he inclined towards that opinion. And Sheikh Sidia, who's a Mauritanian, very real Bedouin, but he was a mufti in the Emirates, but very Bedouin. And he was like, you know, most of the Mauritanians, like the idea that you could challenge Malik is just absolutely absurd. So they would get upset, even if you'd think that you could disagree with him. So he kind of said, how can you say? He said, Imam Malik said it was makruh and you should just leave it at that. And he said, and Sheikh Shaybani said, nah, he said that, you know, it's, and so they were debating about it. And then I mentioned that about the Asians, that certain Asians, you know, eat dogs. And when I said that, the Sheikh Sidiya, who was arguing for the dog, he said, he said, they eat dogs. I said, yeah, they eat dogs. He said, A'udhu billah. And Sheikh Shaybani just looked at me, he said, see, you know, you're disgusted by it. And then he says, also the egg is pure. Illa al-madhir, unless it becomes foul. You know, like a rotten egg is considered najis. وَمَا خَرَجَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهِ. And if it comes out after the animal dies, then it has the category of najis. Balgham, which is phlegm, is considered pure. Safra, which is bile, is considered pure. So the contents of the stomach are pure unless they've been changed. Al-mutaghayyir. All right, so qalas, which is like reflux, you know, gastric reflux, is pure. And bile is pure. It's something that's released by the gallbladder. But if what you vomit is changed, food, and has a smell, it's considered impure. And then maytul adami, you know, the dead things from humans, ma la dama lahu, is pure. والبحر, also things from the ocean. وما ذكي من غير محرم الأكل. And also what was sacrificed, if it's not haram to eat, then it's considered pure. If it's dhukiya, if it had been sacrificed. And then there's a khilaf about the use of animals if it goes through a tanning process. So even like here, belts and things like that. I mean, if you went staunch Maliki madhab, you really shouldn't wear belts that you don't know where they came from. But there's a khilaf about that. and shoes and things like that. The what? Sea pigs, yeah. Khinzir al-Bahar. He considered it, you shouldn't eat it. But that was from the name. And a sea pig is, it's a seal. Yeah, it's the seal. And then also hair, and also the down of the, down of the fluff of feathers, like down. In Shafi'i madhab, it's najis, which is why Shafi'is don't pray in like a down jacket or something like that, whereas in Maliki. So there's a khilaf about that. And then al-jamad, anything that's, like wood and rock and stone, except intoxicants. So alcohol is considered najis. وَلَبْنُ آدَمِيًّا وَغَيْرَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. The milk of humans is not najis, also if it's not haram to eat. وَفَضَّلَةَ الْمُبَاحِ. If it's a permissible animal, like the excrement of the permissible, if it doesn't eat najasa. So for instance, if a chicken eats najasa, then what comes out of it is najis. All right? Like the birds, the same. If they eat najasa, but normally it wouldn't be. If it's mubah, like a dove or something like that. But it's mandub to wipe it off. I mean, anything, because it's mustaqdar. It's something that's foul. And then also the gallbladder, reflux, vomit if it hasn't changed the state of the food, musk and its gland, khamar that has been made into vinegar or dehydrated. It's solid. And also alcoholic, alcohol that's used for like 98 proof type, that's used medicinal alcohol, is not considered najis. And my teachers from Mauritania considered the alcohol in perfume to be also permitted. So, I mean, because there's alternatives, I think it's better to use it, unless obviously it's like a oral, if you've got, if you're using it medicinally. Yeah, because then even to take herbs with alcohol, if it's being used medicinally, is permitted. So a lot of them are, yeah, and you can't drink them. I mean, yeah. No, I was saying that if that, because alcohol, people drink mouthwash to get drunk, so it is alcohol, and it is a muskir. So people should not use it unless if like a dentist prescribed it as a medicine to use and you didn't swallow it. But I would not use alcohol, mouthwash with alcohol for other than medicinal purposes. No, that's fine. Disinfectants are fine. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. Those type, like even the alcohol, they have chocolate liquor. That's just a name. There's certain things. Vanilla has alcohol. I mean, certain things, almost everything, like all fruit drinks have alcohol content. If you actually took orange juice and analyzed it, you're going to get some percentage. But there's things that are ma'fu anhu. لا تسروا عن أشياء تبدأ لكم تسؤكم. If you delve too deeply into things, the Prophet said, هلك المتنطعون, that they perish those who delve too deeply into things. And the Prophet didn't like that kind of obsessive, where people went too extreme about those things. So, I mean, generally, I think a lot of that stuff, like personally, gum it's makruh anyway, gum. Just to chew gum, things like that. Ilq, I mean, the ulama mentioned that in the books, that, they considered it makruh because it was fi'l al-batalin. It was something that people that had too much time did. It was kind of a waste of money and... Wine vinegar is permissible. Yeah. Because it's not wine, it's vinegar, but it goes through a process of being wine. So once it's إذا يتخلل بعد الخمر, it's halal. Once it becomes vinegar after going through the wine process, it's halal. Yeah. What's that? Apple vinegar, all those things, they're permissible. Yeah. I mean, I think generally, yeah, everything, if it's, yeah. I mean, that's what we try to do. Yeah. I mean, it's just better quality. Yeah, طيب, حلالا طيبا. It's always in the Quran, it's halal and pure. I mean, it emphasizes pure, which even though that generally means, like the money, everything, the source of it. Because the food can be halal, but if you purchase it with haram money, it's not tayyib. So, but the fact that that word is such a comprehensive word, tayyib, pure. So things that are pure, food that's more pure. And when they sent in Surah Al-Kahf, when they sent them into the village, they asked him to get the purest food. Azka, which is like the purest food. And then also the ash of najas is not, fire purifies. And the smoke. So if something's najas is burning, the smoke is not najas, even though it gets into you. The unshed blood from a slaughtered animal. So the blood that's like, if you look, there's blood in the meat by the nature, but it's not flowing. That's not najas. And then the najas is the dead of other than what was mentioned, what exits from it, what is separated from it, or the living from that which has life, blood, like a horn, bone, fingernail, hoof, tooth, quill of a feather, and skin, even if it was tanned. So, like those things, if they're not from mudakka. And it is permissible to use it after tanning, to store dry goods in water and shed blood, black bile, the excrement of humans, and then the excrement of, other than the permissible. And also the consumer, anything that eats najasa. Changed vomit. Sperm is considered najas. Some of the ulama say that the sperm itself is not najas, but it becomes yanjus because it exits through the urethra. Like Imam Shafi'i was of the opinion that the basis of the human is not najas, but it becomes yanjus through the urethra. And by consensus, the Prophet ﷺ's, everything that came out of him was pure. And we know that Barakah drank his urine. I mean, that's a sound hadith. She didn't do it intentionally. She used to clean his room, and there was a bowl, and it smelt good, and she thought it was something to drink, and so she drank it, and it was his urine. But and she said about it that she never had a stomachache after that. Yeah. So. But everything, and the Prophet also, they used to, when the Prophet went to relieve himself, they would go and it was gone, because the earth actually takes the fadla of the prophets. And the man drank his blood also. The Prophet was cupped, and he gave some blood to the man. He told him to go bury it, and he took it, and he decided to drink it. And the Prophet said the fire won't touch him because of that. And then medhi and wedhi. Medhi is a prostatic fluid, and wedhi, even though they differentiate from it because they are slightly different, is also a type of prostatic fluid that comes out, and they're both impure. So medhi is the clear, sticky that precedes the. It lubricates, and it precedes when somebody's aroused, they get the medhi. And Sayyidina Ali asked somebody to go ask the Prophet. He said, "Kuntu rajulan madha." I was, somebody that had a lot of this fluid of medhi. He was easily aroused, and he asked the Prophet ﷺ. He asked somebody, he was too embarrassed to ask the Prophet, so he asked somebody to go and ask the Prophet about it. And it's considered. And then whether usually comes if somebody is constipated, and it will come after. It's like a white fluid similar to semen. And then even if it is permissible, and pus, sadid, and qayh. Qayh is pus, sadid is exudate. So the exudate of a wound that comes out, right? Which is blood, really, isn't it? I mean, it's part of the blood. The pus is the white blood cells, right? And then the sadid is the serum of the blood. So, and then everything that flows from the body, such as scabs, if it contains liquid. So if you have boils and things like that, what comes out of it is considered najis. And obviously there's part of it is ma'fu anhu, there's things that are excused just because of the difficulty. So, So some things cannot be purified after contact with najasa, such as meat cooked in it. So if meat was cooked in something that had najasa, then you can't purify it after that. You have to just throw it out. Or an olive that was salted in it, or an egg boiled in it, a clay pot submerged in najasa. Not if it has, there are two types of clay pots, right? There's the clay pots that are porous and they absorb, and then there's glazed, it's been fired in a furnace. That you can clean, but if a clay pot that is porous and it gets najasa, then it can't. And then and also, in this section they talk about it's permissible to benefit from mutanajjis, from something that's impure, like the hide of an animal that was not killed through zakat. If it's tanned, it's permissible, but it shouldn't be used in the masjid, right? And it shouldn't be from a human, like anything used from a human. And then also that it's permissible, it's not permitted for a male adult to use silk. Now, some of the ulama permit a small amount of silk, but it's prohibited to do that. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited it. He allowed Zubair ibn Awam had eczema, and he did allow him to use silk. So if somebody's skin is very sensitive to certain types of materials, and silk is something that's easier for them, then it's permissible to wear silk. And also, it's not permissible to use something that is ornamented with gold or silver. Right? So, now obviously very small amounts in certain fine chinas and things are considered, it's acceptable. In fine chinas, sometimes they have like a very small silver, and also mutli if it's silver plated, things like that. But to eat from silver or gold is not permissible to do that. But it is permissible to put it on your sword or on the mushaf. So gold lettering that's done, the illuminated manuscripts that have gold lettering, that's permitted to do that. Well, like a silver mirror, you mean? Yeah, if it's very fine silver and if it's done for that reason, if it's not, these things are really about extravagance, and extravagance in Sharia is relative. A super rich person, who buys fine china, it's not necessarily considered extravagant, but if you were much more humbler means and you did the same thing, it would be considered extravagant. So there's kind of a relative approach to that, But there's people that have gold toilets and, gold sinks. I've been in houses where that's the case, like literally gold. That's way over the top. And it's permissible to use gold and silver, like you can use it for body parts, because gold is very biocompatible as a material. So sometimes teeth, gold teeth, the bridge of the nose, you can use it for also silver ring, right? A single silver ring. For a male, they should not wear 2 rings. They should only have 1 ring. The sunnah is to have a ring with a fuss that has a stone in it, and on this finger or the small finger, either the left or the right. The dominant opinion is the right, but they're both there. So, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. It's makruh to wear like necklaces and things like that. If it's gold, then it's prohibited. But for men, they shouldn't. Also piercing the ears, anything that, I mean, some of this stuff goes into urf, but generally those things are prohibited. Tattoos are prohibited also. I mean, there's a strong prohibition against tattoos. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's permissible to wear. I mean, white gold, platinum, I personally would avoid it. Just, yeah, titanium's fine. Yeah. Yeah, no, they both have proofs. They both have proofs. I don't know that specific thing, but they both have proofs. I mean, I have a book by Imam al-Hattab. It's Ahkam al-Khawatim, the rules relating to rings, and they go into great. If you do the wudu, they call it ijala. You just have to move it like that. If you do a ghusl, though, you have to take it. You have to get in where the ring is. Yeah. But for the wudu, you just have to, and then if you do tayammum, you have to take it off. There can't be ha'il. It's called a ha'il. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, it is. But, I mean, we have a problem now with filtered water now, because they're starting to take sewage water and filter it. That's definitely a problem. I mean, some of the ulama are against that. The what? Saliva is not najis. In Maliki's madhab, from dogs or pigs. Well, the water's potable. I mean, by law in the U.S., there's a lot of regulation about municipalities. So the water has to be potable. It can't be dangerous. Obviously, in some areas, the content of chlorine is much higher than other areas. I mean, I wouldn't drink. There's a lot of water out there that you can taste it. It just tastes bad. A lot of bottled water is just a complete scam, I mean, the best types of water are like distilled water. You get good water in, like, Whole Foods has good water. So reverse osmosis. I mean, there's, the best water is rainwater if you're in a clear area, or good river water. But also, obviously, there are illnesses now. Especially if there's animals in the area, you can get. But I mean, I grew up drinking from stream water, so I don't ever remember getting sick. Alhamdulillah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد خير ما جزيت نبيا عن أمته. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.